Okay. Alright. So, these are spoons I made. And here they are. Carved some simple walnut I got from my relatives. Um, thank you guys for this. So, you can't really see my face here because I'm down here. There we are. So, I wanted to. I let these season after I carved them, and some of these are pretty nice. But one thing I guess I'm really well aware of is that I'm not perfect at carving. Uh, I know a lot of guys could easily do what I do and make this finish look perfect with a knife, but I'm not there yet. I have a good knife, I have good tools, just my technique isn't there yet. So one of the things I do is I don't sand these. I actually stopped doing sandpaper after a while because I was just it didn't feel right. So I decided to switch to using files, and in my multiple flea market flea market visits, I have acquired a really good toolkit for restoring or for basically getting a good finish on these without resorting to using sandpaper. So I wanted to show that real quick, and I guess to show you what you can use. So a double cut. Um, this was also a flea market find. You can get these rasps. They're pretty widely available, I think, in hardware stores. It's a 4-way, and if you want to go a little bit more premium and get a high carbon steel, because I believe the difference between uh, like mass market files now and regular files is that the mass market ones are made with a steel alloy that isn't really high carbon like O1 or O1 or what's the other one? A1. So they're not like considered high quality steel. You can, I think, make do with the regular, $10. I'm just going off my head here, $10 one. So, but I I did make do with these. I didn't like the finish on the. It's got a rough. It's got a flat side with a rough cut grooving, and then a fine cut. So this is a fine cut, and this is rounded, and it's got a nice way to get into the grooves. You, trying to think here. Then I acquired some half rounds very recently. I think 3 different styles of half rounds. This is a fine bastard. Um, there was one that I cleaned up recently with my has like a cool. One of the things I do enjoy about finding old files is restoring it and finding the logos. But this one, just to show you real quick, see the grooves on this one. It's got some aluminum clogged in it. I couldn't take care of that. But this one, you can kind of see it. There we go, in the light right here. You can see how defined the grooves are on this half round. That's a very rough grind, or the rough grooving. And it takes away material faster than a normal file would, and it leaves a rougher surface. So I use this, and then you can't really see on this one. You can kind of see it in the light here, but it's a lot smoother grooving. It's not as aggressive as this file. I don't know if I can show the difference between the two of them in the camera. Here. There you go. There's that one. This one's a bit nicer. So this one I use for finishing. It doesn't take material away as fast, but it leaves a better surface. So that's just what I do. And then another recent excursion um, led me to find a box of files. And so now I believe this is actually used for carving. It's a double side, and I can see in here in the groovings, this side is rough, much more defined and pronounced grooves, and this side's more fine. So it's probably meant for carving purposes. So I've been using this, and then if you shop online, Whiskey River Handle Company, which I buy a lot of my handles from, they were selling a new old stock Simmons half round with these handles. And this is actually pretty good. The same thing, it's pretty fine. So if I were to say to a new carver, you were into this, you wanted to, you knew you weren't good at it like me, I know I'm not good at it, buy one of these four-way rasps, and then find a way, if you were to shop, say, on Whiskey River online, buy one of these. Um, Something to really give a good finish on these tools. So, just giving a quick rundown of these things. I know the carving tools is more of a special purpose. You know, I think everyone sort of figures out pretty quickly what they like to use. Some people are power carvers, so they know what tool set to use, you know, Dremel tools. Me, I decided early on that I was going to be using a draw knife, and I didn't quite like that whole setup because that required some more specializing, and that's just not me, you know. So I also found a riffler, a distant riffler. Um, it's curved, and this is fine, and this riffler is good for getting in the bowl itself and smoothing it out some. So, real quick, I'm gonna work on one of my spoons. Finish this. This is one I was starting before I recorded. Somewhat close, and I'm gonna use the riffler. Not riffler. I was gonna use this guy. Looks like a cool movie knife. I'm gonna use the rough side. I think something that's nice about spoon carving, as a hobby, especially for someone like me as a beginner, I'm definitely not close to the level that you would see on YouTube if you were to watch a video. But something that can seem daunting at first, and then eventually you'll come to realize like how comfortable you are with it, is your ability to learn methods that work for yourself. So most spoon carvers, um, it's common you get a axe, a knife, and then a hook knife, and you kind of start out with that, or you see another video where a guy uses a two-handed spoon carving knife, which is it's a carving knife that's longer, it's easier to hold and control, and then you see a spoon mule, which is a type of draw knife, or it's a type of shaving horse where you clamp it with your legs, and you hold it in the vise. You learn that way. You can go really good with that, and it's nice that something you'll end up, if you go in this journey and you kind of have the ability to buy tools, um, you'll be able to discover and learn what methods work for you as you go along. It's nice to experiment with these things. Something that's different to learning with a teacher, which I don't want to disparage that method. A teacher is a really good method to learn. I think some guys also use machete. I've heard that. Never did that method. Never did the machete method for carving, just because it's not my thing. In fact, the first thing I started out with was actually a roofing hatchet, because I incorrectly inferred that a roofing hatchet was basically the same as a camping hatchet. It's not. So I used that for a bit, and then after a while, I kind of learned that this wasn't the correct method to use because it wasn't working on, say, because the blade wasn't curved. Now, something I learned now that I think would have helped was learning that, after that point, was learning that carving with a roofing hatchet isn't good because the blade is not curved, so it can't take a more pronounced cut in the wood. So the way the surface area of a carving axe is that it's rounded bit, and the rounding bit allows you to take a cut that's not as deep and that your blade isn't biting into the other side. So you can take a more detailed cut, say, trying to explain this in my head. Um, Whereas a roofing hatchet will just take like the complete cut, where you can't just take a scoop out of something, then go back on a different area of the piece you're carving. So, um, so I would get pieces that were pretty straight, but I wasn't able to do more curved surfaces like this because it would just take too much, and it would also splinter out. You can kind of tell. Another thing with spoons that I loved learning was the seasoning process. Seasoning is when the wood stops losing all its moisture. When you carve with a spoon and you carve wet wood, which you should carve wet wood, it's the easiest way to get a spoon done quickly. Um, Seasoning is when the wood stops shrinking, and it loses pretty much most of its moisture. Because I'm working with the file now, I did this before, and I used to be so upset with the finish that I was like, well, I would just resolve myself, be like, well, I should just use sandpaper. And then I learned that this method is easier because the wood is dry now, so it doesn't splinter off with green wood. Green wood is more, think of it like straws. It was so stringy that I was just like, well, I guess I should just use sandpaper, which sandpaper's fine on green wood, but it just doesn't, now that I know how easy it is to let it season, let it lose all its moisture, how easy it is to work now. So, I'm talking more than I should be working. And after this, I use a linseed oil finish, and I recently was told about, if you want a tip on the seasoning process, I was told to use a wax, beeswax, after you carve the spoon, because when the moisture leaves, it tends to shrink, like the wood tends to shrink, warp. Depending on the type of wood you use, the shrinkage can be pretty bad or pretty good. It's the common thing about using green wood, and because North America has such a diverse, I mean, in the time that we are now, diverse tree species, although certain ones have died off, and as I speak, the emerald ash borer has worked its way into Pennsylvania forests, so that's that's a bit of a problem, and so soon soon those will probably not exist, um, if nothing is done, and but for now we have a diverse tree species, and one of the ones I like working with is walnut, because walnut's still pretty widely available here in Pennsylvania. Um, Easy to carve. There's plenty of it. If I go in the summertime, I can easily spot, walnut groves. Just in the, they're such an easy species. They grow. They're so easy to work well with other tree species, so they exist in a good network. So, but other woods tend to shrink more, and walnut is specifically the best for that doesn't crack as much. And the reason you use a wax finish is that when the moisture leaves, it tends to expand in different directions, which is why you got to be careful about where your rings are going when you carve. Um, and wax is supposed to help. Beeswax specifically is supposed to help with the cracking, so it doesn't uh, leave a opening in the bowl of your spoon. So, and then after this, after I finish this video, it should be done soon. I've got a Johnson, uh, Johnson file company. Um, Pretty much it's a giant bastard file. So I've got to clean up the grooves and see if it's good. And then I've got another, two other unique looking files sitting in some vinegar over there. I've got to clean those up too. But I've got the wire wheel out for that. I had this thing for a while where I was like, oh, what am I going to use for cleaning out these files? Because, the natural methods, I don't like to use tools. So what are the natural methods? The natural method is a